Okay, so today, at the time of me recording this, it is June 19th, 2026. It is Juneteenth, and happy Juneteenth to all those who celebrate. Now, I thought, how do I combine Juneteenth, Pride Month, all in one? Moonlight? Well, I mean, okay, Moonlight isn't really a Juneteenth film. It's a black LGBT story, but I said, screw it. Let's do a black story on Juneteenth that also ties into Pride Month. But this is a strong black movie nonetheless. This movie is a special one. Uh, now, in my last video, I covered heated rivalry, and you guys were amazing, telling me everything I got wrong and that I'm pretty much just a stupid straight guy. Nah, I'm kidding. I loved all the feedback, all the comments, and I loved all the conversations I had down in the comments. So, guys, drop some comments if you feel strongly about anything I'm saying here. That is what these are for. I want feedback. I love it. I'm totally cool to criticism. I'm not a genius. I don't know everything. I'm just a guy who loves movies and loves people and loves reviewing them. So, with this movie, although I'm not gay, I am black, as you can see. So I can speak to some of this, if not all of it, because let's be real, homosexuality in the black community is still taboo, even in 2026. Back when this came out 10 years ago, it was. Back when this movie takes place, it absolutely was. All right, so we're going to celebrate Moonlight's 10-year anniversary this year. It came out in 2016, directed by Barry Jenkins, who won Best Picture for this movie. And I think this is the perfect time for us to touch on Moonlight. So if you guys have a good conversation by the end of this video, maybe you consider subscribing. If that is not a step you're willing to take, that is totally fine. Maybe you can help me out by throwing a like on this video. If you're a cinephile, make sure you follow me on Letterboxd. That link is dropped in the comments, or sorry, in the description below. So let's get into Moonlight. All right, Moonlight, man. Moonlight is a crazy, crazy movie that I just adore for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons I adore this movie, and okay, before we even get into anything, if you haven't seen Moonlight, please turn this off because we're not gonna go over it scene by scene or anything like that. But I will be spoiling some of it, with how we're talking about it. So let's go. Now, one thing I like that this movie deals with, and we see right away, this movie is split into three parts, okay? We got Little, Chiron, and Black, okay? And Little, we cover the life of one guy through the span of, I'd say, probably from the time he's about, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10, up until I'd say he's about late 20s. And we see this guy go through a lot. And this young queer man is struggling with his identity throughout each phase of his life. And as kids, like I just said, I'm not gay, so I couldn't tell you how this feels. But as kids, I knew what type of women I was attracted to at a very, very young age. And I'm not going to discuss what type of women that is, but I knew very young what type of women I liked. They caught my eye and made me excited. And I'm sure it's the exact same thing for gay people. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just couldn't imagine it not being the same way. But as a child, and you see everyone else interested in something you're not interested in, I'm sure it causes lots of confusion in the mind of a young kid. And this movie tackles that very well, especially in the Little scene where we see Little, a young boy who is growing up in, I believe it's the Miami area of Florida, which is why I threw this shirt on for you guys today. A little Hawaiian style, a little vacation style. But Little is a young kid who, his mother is unfortunately not the best mom. And we'll talk about his mom in a minute. But Little ends up befriending two people in his young life. A Afro-Latino man named Juan from Cuba, and another young boy named Kevin. And these are the only two people who are really nice to him. Oh, and Juan's girlfriend, Teresa, who is amazing. And Juan is a drug dealer, and he finds Little running from a group of kids at the beginning of this movie, and he's hiding out in an abandoned apartment building. And we can guess why Little is running from these kids, and we can guess why this is a problem. We all know they don't like Little, and we know why they don't like Little, and we don't have to discuss it. Juan finds Little and pretty much befriends him and takes him under his wing. Although Juan is a drug dealer, someone hard, someone fierce, he knows what's up with Little, but he doesn't judge him for that. And, I've heard a lot of people wonder, was Juan's sexuality in question as well, or was Juan confused as a child? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but I personally think Juan was just a good guy who wanted to help a kid who needed help. And Juan didn't have kids of his own. Maybe he saw something in him that he saw in himself and he wanted to take him under his wing. But Little, as a child, is very confused, and people pick on him. They don't want him around, but it's never explicitly explained why. And I love that in part one, because there's this ambiguous nature around not only the people around him, but his sexuality itself. Little doesn't know. Little knows he's different, but he doesn't understand why he's different or what makes him different. And there's some very distinct lines that are used in Act 1 that highlight that, and I think they're brilliant. Little's mom, she knows why he gets picked on. She knows who he is, and Little's mom doesn't care. She's a nurse, and we'll get to her more so in a minute because I want to cover a specific part dealing with her and her arc. So Little is kind of a loner, pretty much is a loner. And his buddy Kevin tells him that he has to be hard. You got to be hard in this game, and these guys will stop picking on you. And so he shows him, there's a dope scene where he shows him how to fight and, what he's got to do to keep these people off of him. And Little takes all the lessons that he learns from everyone and he carries them into his adulthood, his teenagehood. And Little learns very quickly, and Little is very observant. He's a quiet guy, but my God, his ears and antenna is always working. I personally love people like that. Myself, I'm a jabber. I'm a yipper. I talk. Yes, I listen. I'm observant, but y'all hear me? I'm a chatterbox. I've always admired people who can sit back and just focus and take things in. And that's the kind of guy Little is. And Little's mother, she's ashamed of him, and she doesn't like him. And she even expresses to Juan that you know why they pick on him, the way he walks, his mannerisms, the way he moves. All these things indicating that Little is gay. And we obviously, as an audience, we know Little is gay, but Little still confused about this. So he asks Juan, am I an F slur? And I am not going to say that word. It's not a word that's in my vocabulary, but I think you guys all know what that is. I don't use that word because it just sounds wrong to me, and it is wrong. And people in that community, they want to use that word amongst themselves. That's on them. Kind of like the M word. It's certain groups of people want to use words that are geared towards them. That's on them. It's not my place to tell them that. But I personally, I'm not going to repeat those words, but you can guess what that word is. And Juan says to Little, no, you are not that. Okay? You could be gay or you can be whatever, but you're not that word, and you'll never be that word. And it's not a word you should let anyone call you. And Little asks him, well, am I gay? And Juan's like, basically tells him you're a kid. You're growing up, you're learning things. And that's not something to really worry about right now at your age. And I think that was one of the most beautiful and brilliant scenes in this movie. Mahershala Ali, plays Juan, and he did win the Oscar for this for Best Supporting Actor, which he very much deserved. And although he's not in the movie a lot, he's kind of got the Tiana Taylor effect from One Battle After Another. His presence in the first act is so strong, it carries all the way through the movie, even though we don't see him. And I think Juan was just such a great influence on Little in this harsh environment of drugs, gangs, violence, things that growing up in the hood, we're all too familiar with. I know about this stuff. Of course, I've lived in the hood. I've grown up in the hood. I've grown up, lived in a lot of places. I've been around hood stuff. I've been around not hood stuff. I've got to see life through a lot of different sides, angles, and lenses. And I know the type of environment this kid was growing up in, and I know it's tough. And, that sexuality confusion at that age, that's rough on a young kid. I know it can be. And I think this movie tackles this very well in a nice, subtle way. But one thing laying underneath all of this, and let's talk about a little Juneteenth stuff here, a little black stuff here, the crack epidemic. Now, I said I would get back to Little's mom. Little's mom is a crack head. And at the beginning of the story, she's hooked on the drugs, but it's not too bad. You can tell it's just getting started because I personally believe this movie starts out in the late 80s. If I'm not, I think it's supposed to be the late 80s, maybe the early 90s. It's in the height of the crack epidemic. So, I mean, this woman's, she's functional at this point. Like I said, she's a nurse, but she doesn't give a damn about Little or where he's at, what he's doing. Clearly, Juan has been taking care of him. Juan's been showing him life. She's not showing him a damn thing. But Little's smart, and Little learns how to navigate life without her. And her drug habit, obviously, is going to get worse as the movie goes on. But Naomi Harris plays this character, and my lord, brilliantly, might I add. I believe she did get an Oscar nom for this. Man, whoever won that year must have been bringing it because she was very good as well. I think Naomi Harris's character was brilliant, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of black children who grew up in the mid-late 80s, early 90s dealt with a mom like this, dealt with a parent like this, drug addicted, not caring about who you are, stealing from you. You come home one day, where's the TV? That kind of thing. And unfortunately, the crack epidemic is one of the worst things to hit the black community. And I gotta say, as a man of color, as a black man, I am proud to see that, this isn't as rampant in the black community as it once was. Is crack still around? Of course. People still smoke crack, of course. It is what it is. Crack ain't going nowhere. Somebody's always going to be on it. But it's not hitting us like it did back then. But the unfortunate part is the bringing in of these drugs created some of the worst things in the black community. And on Juneteenth, we're still trying to break free of that. We're still trying to break free of some of these mindsets that have been created and been ingrained in us for 40 years, And we're not going to talk about the 400. We're just talking about the 40. The crack epidemic set the black community back probably about 100 years. The war on drugs, the violence, the drug dealings, the money, everything that came with this is absolutely horrible. Well, we all know we didn't bring this stuff here, but resilient, strong black people overcoming this stuff every day. And I'm very, very glad that although in the environment we're in, the climate we're in, this political state, we're still fighting every day and making sure we're doing right by each other, doing right by our people. Don't let a few inflated statistics and people spouting this and that off their mouth make you think that that's the norm and that's everything that goes on, because that is not it. We see too many great examples of good things going on in the community to let things like the crack epidemic hold us back. So I'm glad this movie touches on it, and I'm glad that this movie has shown us that, is it still there? Yes. We have grown a lot and learned a lot from it, although we're still trying to put together the pieces. So, man, Act 2, though, Chiron. Chiron is Little's real name. And Chiron here, we meet teenage kid. He's probably, I think he's supposed to be about 16 or 17 here. And we have a quiet, very reserved, very laid back, and just depressed young man. Chiron he goes through it every day. His mother's addiction by now is absolutely horrible. It has gotten so bad. She steals money from him. She abuses him. She yells at him. She guilt trips him. She does everything that an addict does to the people they love. And we see this young man having to deal with this, and it's just not fair. Not only that, this man has to go to school and deal with bullies. And these kind of bullies are different, man. I've seen bullies on the white side. I've seen bullies on the black side. They can both get bad, obviously. But man, these bullies here, they are no joke. Because homophobia in the black community, let's just talk about it. It's still there. And I think it's going to be there, for a long time. Now, have we gotten better? Absolutely. I think the black community has gotten a lot better. As of right now, 2026, recording this episode, I think the black community has gotten much better with how we deal with our gay people, how we deal with our trans people, all of it. And that's a great thing because, listen, I'm a human and I love all humans. And I think it's crazy how homophobic the black community has and can be. I've seen it. I've heard it firsthand. Okay, I have. It is what it is. I mean, man, I got made fun of in the black community for being a skateboarder, for wanting to have my hair a little bit different, for maybe my clothes fitting a little bit tighter. Like, people would ask me if I was gay because of that. Crazy. Just because of a style choice. When clearly I liked women. It was obvious, and it's interesting because I think a lot goes into the homophobia in the black community. One, there's a religious thing tied to it. Black people, we can be very religious, as we know, but also, it's just there's a lot of hypermasculinity that can be in the black community, and homosexuality and hypermasculinity just don't go together. But I think we've made strides as people to get better. But Chiron, he goes through it. He goes through it in Act 2. And Act 2 is my absolute favorite because I believe there's another gay person in the story. And I'm not talking about Kevin. Kevin, his friend that I discussed earlier, who he has his first gay sexual encounter with in Act 2. And it was actually one of the most beautiful moments in this movie because it oddly felt natural. And it felt so authentic. I don't know. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't to the top. They didn't even sleep with each other. They just had a moment on the beach, smoking a little something. And it's a beautiful scene laid out with this beautiful cinematography and this blue color because, as they say in this movie, in Moonlight, black boys look blue. And we get a lot of dope moonlighted shots, and we see the blue skin reflected off of these dark-skinned black men. Just some great artistic choices here. And unfortunately, Chiron has to do some things in this because these bullies take it too far. And Chiron, I think he was dealing with a bully that was also gay himself. The guy with the dreads who always wears the hats, the guy with the locks. Yeah. I think he was gay. And I think he didn't like Chiron because Chiron represented everything he is. It's kind of like how we hear now with this administration. We hear all this projection, all this stuff that they, everyone else does, but certain other people are absolved from. And I think this is the same thing going on here. I believe that character was repressed. And they do some main messed up stuff to Chiron, and Chiron says, fuck you, and retaliates, and it is the most beautiful thing ever. And if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. Absolutely incredible. In Act 2, some of the best coming of age stuff you're ever going to see. And seeing this young black man straddle the line between wanting to be hard and wanting to be himself, that's a tough line to straddle. And that is the meat and the potatoes of this movie. So, Act 3, Black. Trevante Rhodes playing older Chiron. Chiron now is, oh my God, he's going to jail. He's gotten hardened. He is a high-level drug dealer. He is jacked as hell. He has gotten very black, and he is tough. But he's also one of the most tender, sweet souls that you're going to meet. Black is different than your average, I'll put air quotes on this, hood guy. Black's quiet. Black keeps to himself. Black just wants to make his money and live his life. And, you know, they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, who was his father figure? It was Juan. What was Juan? Juan was a drug dealer. I mean, he was a spitting image of Juan. The way he acted, the way he handled himself, you know, his attention to detail, the neatness, which I think also brings that question back around. Was Juan gay? Yes, Juan had a girlfriend whom he really loved, a beautiful girl. Janelle Monáe plays Teresa. She's gorgeous. I mean, Jesus, Janelle Monáe. But we still don't know if Juan was a certain type of way. Because for Juan to be that type of way, in the environment he was in the time he was in, whew, that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. And Black hid one of the biggest things about himself from the world. And that's got to be hard to live like that. It's got to be hard to live knowing you can't be who you want to be, knowing you can't do the things you necessarily may want to do because of the skin you live in and the environment you're placed in. Do other groups and races have issues when they deal with the LGBT in their life? Of course. Of course. But man, it seems like on the Black American side, seems like it can be a little bit harsher. I mean, the light waves I got from it, from even just, you know, maybe even possibly, it was crazy. So I could only imagine if you were actually like that, because people know, you know, people have gaydars. They know. I'm pretty good with that. I usually know when someone is. There's times I've been very, very fooled or confused, but I usually know when someone is. And like, I can only imagine trying to be the hardest guy on the block while admitting that you like men. But men are still men, whether you like men or not. The hardest guy on the block can like men because his strength, his masculinity, none of that's going to matter with who he lays down with at night. So this movie, it brilliantly shows that loneliness, that veil, hiding yourself from the world, and just being afraid to let that moonlight shine on who you really are. And in this Act 3, Kevin comes back around and they meet up, and they're both different. They both had life experiences. They're both in their late 20s now. And they have one of the most tender moments I've ever seen in an LGBT film. And the movie ends in one of the most brilliant ways I think this movie could end. One of the most brilliant ways I think it should end. Ambiguous, loving, tender, and sweet. And I mean, I couldn't ask for more. This movie is absolutely fantastic, and the message is sending out a message to not only Black people, but all queer people too. Because yes, this is a Black story I'm sure any queer person can relate to it in some capacity. Someone who's been repressed, someone who's held in their identity. It's some good stuff here. But I gotta talk about, before we wrap this up, we're gonna wrap this up in a second. I just gotta talk about two things. One, the style of this movie. I mentioned a little bit earlier, I mean, this movie has a lot of flavor. The way it's shot, these blue tones in Florida, it feels hot, but it also feels tropical and magical. The shots of the nighttime with the moonlight, and the whole thing in this is Moonlight Black Boys Look Blue. This is adapted from a play, and I believe that is the title. And Barry Jenkins does such a good job of capturing this style and this moment and making us feel like we're in this story with these people and these actors. My God, they're all so good. I absolutely adore these actors. They are brilliant. From Mahershala Ali, Naomi Harris, Trevante Rhodes. I mean, they were all just, come on now. So this movie is absolutely one. If you haven't watched it in a while, maybe throw that on this LGBT season. I really, really think this is an important one. I'm not saying it's necessarily a Juneteenth movie. I just thought it would be nice to talk about a black story on Juneteenth and throw some LGBT ties into it because you guys know I love Pride Month. So, with that said, I'm going to give Moonlight a perfect 10 out of 10. I mean, come on, I've seen this movie a bunch of times. It gets better every time. It never gets old, and I find something new to cling to every time I watch it. So guys, thank you so much for watching my Moonlight review. If you had a good time, enjoyed our conversation, maybe you consider subscribing. That's cool. If you are not ready to take that step, maybe you can throw a like on this video to help me out. I would really appreciate it. Follow me on Letterboxd if you are a cinephile. I got a podcast with my buddy, The Cutting Room Floor. I'll link that below for more long-form movie content. If there is a film or topic you would like me to review, just drop it down in the comments below and I will get to it after Pride Month. I will be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.